everyone, Daljeet Peterson here from astrolab21.com. This video we're talking about Taurus season 2023, which is going to start tomorrow officially as the sun ingresses into the sign of Taurus after the last month in Aries, a very eventful month astrologically, as we've had both Pluto changing signs from Capricorn into Aquarius, as well as Saturn moving from Aquarius into Pisces. So a lot of shifting frequencies. These are really, the background frequency is about to change as Pluto moves into Aquarius. And we've talked about this in previous videos. I talked about it quite a bit in the year, my year preview for 2023 about these two major transition points, that this would be probably the most active part of the year astrologically, with these major shifts occurring. And then this eclipse that we're going to have tonight, as a matter of fact, is really going to put a punctuation on this transition. I really think this is a symbol of this transition that we're moving into, and it's setting us up for, I think, the next year or 18 months as we move into a new eclipse cycle. We're starting to move from this Taurus Scorpio axis, and we're going to be moving into the Aries Libra axis, where all of the eclipses will occur in either Aries or Libra for the next 18 months, starting in the next eclipse season, starting in Scorpio season later this year. So we're having this interesting thing. The nodes are still in Taurus and Scorpio, as we'll see, but the eclipse is occurring in Aries. So it should become clear when we look at the chart visually. So without further ado, let's jump in and bring the chart up here. And so, yeah, what I'm pointing to is here we are actually tonight, or early tomorrow morning, actually at 12:12 a.m. here Eastern Standard Time, which is a pretty interesting numerological coincidence, is the exact degree and minute of the solar eclipse that we're going to have here in Aries at 29 degrees 50 minutes of Aries. We see the sun and moon exactly conjunct, and here's where the north node is, here at 4 degrees Taurus. But that 5-degree difference is close enough to be a pretty significant eclipse. It's not a total eclipse, it's still a partial eclipse, but it will be visible. I believe it's going to be mostly over parts of Asia. We're not going to see it here in the West or in North America, although we are going to have one this time next year in Aries, which will be visible, I believe, in North America. So, and it's interesting to think forward to the next cycle, where we're entering into this new phase of eclipses, which will punctuate what we're going to experience today and tomorrow. Is going to be in effect in a way until next year, and through this 18-month period that we've been talking about, as Pluto moves into Aquarius, is going to retrograde back to Capricorn, back into Aquarius, back to Capricorn. It's not until the end, nearly the end of 2024, before it moves into Aquarius for good and will remain there for the next 18 years. So we're setting up this, 2-decade nearly cycle. And I feel like this eclipse is really giving us sort of the keynote to the background frequency that is changing with this move of Pluto into Aquarius. The reason being, as we can see here, is that this eclipse is taking place while Pluto is squaring the eclipse. So we see Pluto here at 0 degrees, which we've talked about. It's just ingressed in, and it is square to both the north node and this eclipse here in the last degree of Aries. Obviously, it's squaring the south node in Scorpio as well. And so this is setting up as a very potent configuration, right? Because, listen, a eclipse alone is a really strong signature. Whenever we have eclipses, they are powerful omens. They have the power to reveal what is hidden, right? And hide, and also hide at the same time. There's this sort of dualistic quality to these eclipses. So many times secrets are revealed, but sometimes things become even further eclipsed, right? So particularly this solar eclipse here with the Earth blocking out the light, or the moon, I should say, blocking out the light. This is an intense eclipse, obviously, for the reason alone that it's occurring at that 29th degree of Aries, right? The anaretic degree, that last degree of any sign, usually symbolizes endings, things being completed, right? And it's interesting here with Aries, the first sign, this is the end of the beginning of this season, of this year, and the beginning of the end, in some ways, of this era that we've been in, this Pluto in Capricorn era, and this move into Pluto in Aquarius. So this, to me, is a really powerfully configured eclipse, right? Anytime you get Pluto involved with an eclipse, there's going to be some intensity, right? You've got Jupiter is in the neighborhood here, as we can see, 6 degrees within this eclipse, so that's still a significant position, sitting as it is between the eclipse of the sun and moon and Chiron here. So there's a lot of this Aries energy being constellated by this event. So there's the initiation of the new, right, with Aries season and this new energy of Pluto trying to come out, trying to express itself. So I think this is a real window of opportunity to see what is this Pluto era have in store for us as it shifts its frequency from this Capricorn tone and frequency to this Aquarius tone and frequency. And I think we're seeing a lot of it already, this preview of what this Aquarius period is going to be. Of course, Aquarius is all about scientific progress, technological innovation, right? It's that fixed air sign. It's of high ideals, right? So technology and the whole issue around AI is a big subject that I think we're going to be dealing with over the next 20 years. And so as it moves into the sign, it's interesting how much discussion there is around this ChatGPT and the unfolding of AI. We've got people who are very concerned about it. It seems like the floodgate has opened, and it's so appropriate that it sort of comes online during this transition, right? Also of interest, if you're following global events, is the failure of a couple of banks over the last month, right? Just as Pluto ingressed into Aquarius, and it really is a bookend to, just as Pluto ingressed into Capricorn back in 2008 was the beginning of the great financial crisis, right? Very interesting, and it's something I'm quite fascinated by, is the Pluto cycles that I've studied as long as I've been studying astrology, beginning back when Pluto was in Sagittarius, really was interested in that transition into Capricorn, and all that unfolded there was like, almost to a script in a lot of ways. So as we're unwinding the Pluto in Capricorn period and getting this glimpse, what is this going to be like? And some of these issues that we're grappling with, I think, are going to be the major themes of Pluto in Aquarius. And very often during that shift, as it moves from one sign to the other, there are a lot of very significant events, right? As one chapter closes, one begins, right? Or a new song, a new tone, a new theme that's emerging that becomes the background frequency in the collective for decades, right? Pluto, a very slow-moving planet. So feels like this eclipse is giving us a more precise glimpse into this new era that's unfolding. And so I anticipate this will be a very powerful eclipse. So really aware of what it is. Eclipse is always a good time for intention, for some sort of ritual, just to be aware of what is being revealed, what is being occluded, what is being eclipsed, right? That light of the sun being blocked out. It can be very, it can bring up a lot of unconscious material for us, the subconscious. Sometimes the shadow qualities emerge during these periods. It's a great time for deep introspection, right? And with this, Pluto taking place here and squaring this eclipse. Of course, that just adds to a degree of intensity, right? Pluto just intensifies everything it touches. So we're taking an already intense eclipse here in the last degrees of Aries, in the anaretic degree, right, which is within the bound of Saturn here, right? So it could be difficult, it could be challenging. There could be a lot of difficult information coming up as we're moving into the newness of Aries, reflected in the newness of this period of Pluto and Aquarius. There's a lot going on here. We see also that Mars over here in Cancer, squaring that Chiron in Aries. So there's, some of this, cardinal energy. And of course, we think about Mars is the ruler of Aries. So it's sort of the host of this eclipse, if you will. And interestingly, you've got Mars is in its fall here in Cancer. So it's in a rather weak position, not able to sort of fortify and strengthen this eclipse here in Aries. So it feels like perhaps this Pluto influence would be stronger than normal. If we had a stronger placed Mars, it may be a different story. Mars not aspecting Pluto at this time, although we will be looking forward, and I'll be very interested to Mars getting to that 0 degree of Aries at the end of Taurus season, the beginning of Gemini season, because it will be square to Pluto here in Aquarius. And I'll probably do a separate video on that because it's something I've been tracking as it relates to the war in Ukraine. Because if you remember last spring when the initial invasion took place, it was during Mars conjunct Pluto in those later degrees. I think it was like 27 degrees of Capricorn back here. And that was a clear indicator of aggression. And so this whole process, this whole war has initiated under that energy. So we're going to be really sensitive to the transits of Mars as it relates to Pluto and to that synodic cycle, the squares, the oppositions, and then the eventual conjunction or return will probably punctuate this war in a very significant way. At least we can expect that some significant phases unfold in concurrence with this cycle, because that Mars-Pluto cycle is the sign or the cycle of aggression, of war, of challenge. They're both very intense planets, and whenever they get together in these hard aspects, it really tends to show up in ourselves, obviously, and in the world, right? It's always working on both of those, or all levels, right? It's personal, it's transpersonal, it's collective, right? So that's what we're all looking for here. So, will we get something very intense occurring during this eclipse? Quite possibly. You're going to feel, if you're sensitive to it, you are definitely going to feel this effects, right? And this is really going to hit those late degrees of the cardinals and the first degrees of the fixed signs. And this is going to be in effect, this whole time with Pluto at these early degrees of Aquarius, right? Because it's going to be squaring, all the early degrees of all the fixed signs and opposing that early degree of Leo, the opposite fixed sign. So these points here are going to be incredibly sensitive, right? So if you have significant planets, say your sun, moon, or rising is at, near or at the 0 degree point of any of the fixed signs, right? Aquarius or Leo or Scorpio or Taurus. This intense power for transformation, for change, for disruption, right? Pluto is all about, bringing up the transformative energy. It is a very underground, unconscious, primordial energy. It has this libidinal quality, this dark, sexual, earthy. I think it's the ultimate yin essence, right? And its truest sense, right, of the dark, the underground, the receptive, the fertile, right? It has that quality, you know. Someone referred to it as like the grandmother yin energy. And I love that thinking, right? I think because I think Pluto is essentially feminine in nature. And this is something that Liz Green talked about decades ago in some of her writings. You know, that it really is the mother goddess in some ways, right? And so it has this almost fatalistic quality to it, right? It is you have to accept and surrender to that power, right? It's irrational at times. It's changing. It's disruptive, and it really is at its core, at its essence, it is the impulse to evolve. It is pushing us to evolve. The evolutionary power, the mutational power. It has that quality. So we're certainly in a period of great change. We feel this mutation taking place all around us. We've got these old Capricorn stories, the old hierarchies, the way we've been working for not just this last, 20 years or so where Pluto's moved through Capricorn, but this is really, the end of an era. Really, the whole modern era was built on sort of Capricorn principles, if you will. So it's interesting to be alive during this time, right? We are bearing witness to a massive shift, a frequency shift. So, really be aware of what is shifting within us all, too, because remember, we can take it from the macro to the micro, right? It all comes back to ourselves. We are part of this energy pattern, right? So would encourage you to really look at, where is this 29 degrees of Aries in your chart? Right? Where does that take place for you? I know that's for me in the 5th house on the cusp of my 6th. What planets may be there where you are really going to get triggered in that way, or get that connection, that energy, that power to transform that area of your life. Where is that 0 degrees Aquarius point in your chart? Right? This is a portal into a chance to start a new cycle, right? And if you use whole sign systems as I do, it usually means it's moving into a new house for you, right? I know for me, I'm tracking that as a shift from my 2nd to my 3rd house. I've been tracking Pluto through Capricorn, was all 2nd house for me in the last, what is it, 14 years, 15 years of Pluto in Capricorn. That has really been this slow churning of my 2nd house issues, money, resources, value, right? Accumulation of those. Now as I'm looking at this change, it's like, okay, this is a shift. I'm now being called to transform Pluto, 3rd house Aquarius issues, information, education, communication, dialogue, friendships, like relationships, of how to get the word out, expressing myself better, my writing, my communicating, right? This is going to be 2 decades of Pluto moving through my 3rd house. We all have this happening. It's going to be in a different house for you depending on, your chart, your rising sign. So if you don't know your chart, I really encourage you to either learn it yourself. You can get a free chart, get a reading from astrologer that you know or trust, or and really figure out where these transits are triggering and showing up for you personally, because we're all the energy itself is archetypal, and there are qualities to it, but really that's really where you can dial in some really helpful guidance by knowing where are these transits taking place for you. So that's a big start to this Taurus season. Of course, the very next day, the sun does move officially into Taurus here at the 0 degree, and it's going to, get an exact square from Pluto, right? So this energy of this eclipse is going to continue, and it sort of bridges this transition from Aries to Taurus. So it's really going to punctuate the seasonal shift that we're in, and it's going to set the tone for at least the next year, as we're moving into these Aries and Libra eclipses, right? Really setting a tone for the next year. So whatever you're doing, your intentions, what do you want to set in motion? What is the new beginning, the end of the beginning and the beginning of the end? What is coming to a close? What are you ready to put in the past and move forward with? And what is the new energy that you want to bring in, right? Last chance to get a contact with the sun here in the North Node in Taurus. We've been talking about that for the last 18 months, right? This is embodiment. North Node Taurus. How can I become more embodied? How do I relate to my physical body, my earth, myself, in a more profound way? What do I want to, in the embodiment practices of encouraging us all to, something very physical, right? And we're leaving behind South Node, Scorpio, the old emotional patterns, the old wounds that we've been carrying, right? This has been a process of bringing those to the surface to be healed, to be released, so that we can move into this more embodied Taurus kind of nature as we move forward, right? This year now, those nodes are going to shift. They're moving retrograde, right? And so within the next couple months, we're going to be moving into Aries, Libra, right? Now we're moving into fire and air, right? Spirit and mind, where we've been in body and soul here for 18 months. Major shift. And that is why, this first eclipse in fire, air, spirit, we're coming into a very, I think, spiritual period, spiritual awakenings, right? And this can be seen as coinciding with this Saturn moving into Pisces, another huge background frequency shift, right? We've had 5 years of Saturn in its own signs. It's been spent 2.5 years in Capricorn, 2.5 years in Aquarius, both signs that it traditionally rules, right? So we've been in a very Saturnian period, and we don't have to rehash that. We all know how Saturnian the last 2 or 3 years has really been. Now we're moving into Pisces. This is another part of the background frequency shifting in quite a profound way. And with both of these planets moving within, a couple weeks of each other in the last month, fairly significant. So, being prepared for this spiritual renewal, the rebirth, the North Node moving through Aries. We are moving into new territory. Full stop, right? So that's something to be aware of as well as we contemplate our new direction personally during this eclipse. And everyone's getting that wake up, right? What is this new direction? We're in a new period, individually, interpersonally. You may be finding that within your relationship dynamics, particularly if this is taking place over in your 7th house, right? If you are maybe a Libra rising or Scorpio rising, this is all happening in that part of your chart. Something to be aware of. But very profound as we move through. Now, the major thing that we want to talk about, and this is sort of the big event, right? So this will reverberate for the next weeks, the next months and year, right? As we contemplate this eclipse. We're going to get a lunar eclipse later in the month at the full moon in Scorpio. So we'll check, we will consider that. So it's certainly a 2-week period to look at the impact of this eclipse as they bookend the new and full moon. But one of the other major things that's going to happen on April 22nd, we see here that Mercury is going to station retrograde. So we're going to come into a Mercury retrograde period that will begin on the 22nd of April. I think it will station direct again on May 17th. So, you've got that 3 to 4 week period where we are dealing with Mercury retrograde in Taurus, right? And I think it's interesting to note that it is stationing here, almost getting to that conjunction with Uranus. And I think this is a significant point here. Just to highlight that for you, right? So Mercury and Uranus together, right? These are the higher and lower octaves of our mental plane, right? Mercury is the more mundane part of our mental process, whereas Uranus tends to symbolize the higher mind, right? The connection to higher principles and ideals and ideas, right? It's our inner genius, right? It's where we get the downloads of very powerful insights, very sudden, right? So I think it's interesting that this conjunction here sort of sets the tone for me for how I want to approach this particular Mercury retrograde, right? There's something that's calling us to come back into ourselves, our own mental process, right? As all Mercury retrogrades do. It's an inward process of the archetype and its symbolism. With Mercury, it's mind. It's communication. It's our self-expression. It's information. It's the sharing of ideas and information, the movement. It represents the movement of commerce, right? The way money is exchanged. There's a lot of, the umbrella of what Mercury represents is quite broad, right? But it's all of those sort of communication. It's the great, it's the communications director of the zodiac. So we're being called to, I think, find our own unique expression, right? Uranus is the ultimate symbol of individuation, right? That term we get from the Jungian tradition of psychology, right? This process of becoming our true selves, of individuating, of separating from the consensus, from the tribe, from the herd, right? What are we willing to be our own individual selves? Are we willing to have our own ideas? Are we willing to have our own unique expression? Do we want to have our own voice? Mercury, Uranus. What is our uniqueness? All right, we're going to be called to really consider that, to reconsider that. Do we have the courage and the determination and the wherewithal to speak our truth, our own individual truth? Because that's a serious capacity to promote change, to be agents of change. The people who we look up back through history, those who have had the greatest effect on society, have been different, have dared to be different, right? You think of that great advertising slogan of Apple's throughout the 90s and into the new millennium, right? Think different. That was sort of their slogan. This is very much a think different kind of configuration. So here we have, Pluto's going to, or I should say, pardon me, Mercury will be retrograding backwards here. It's going to have its conjunction with the Sun on May 2nd at 11 degrees of Taurus. It's going to make it all the way back to a very close to a conjunction with the nodes, with the North Node, I should say. It looks like, what did I say? On the May 15th, it looks like 14th, 15th. It stations here fairly close to the nodal axis. So here we're getting another connection to what's taking place tonight, right? With this eclipse, as Mercury goes back and meets up with the nodes. In this time, we're going to have a Sun-Uranus conjunction. That will take place on May 9th here at 18 degrees. So this is kind of, to me, giving us a lot of the tone and character of this Taurus season, right? This Mercury retrograde. We've had Uranus moving through Taurus for a number of years now. It's now more than, almost 2/3 of the way through. The Sun connection with Taurus. What is the unique, not only mental, right, but then how do we embody those new ideas? How do we take that Mercury mental process and make it physical? How do we embody it in a Taurus way that is practical, that is grounded, that is sensual, right? All of the things that Taurus wants us to explore. We're in this period, right? It's a very sensual time of year, right? If you're in a part of the northern hemisphere where you have seasons, and as I am here in New England, the nature is just bursting, right? All the buds of the trees are opening. Every day a new plant is emerging, is opening. A tree that was merely a bud yesterday, you wake up the next morning and it's poof, it's bursting with color and richness and sensuality. It's a delicious time of the year, right? We're this middle peak power of spring that Taurus represents. It's earthy, right? You can touch, taste, and feel it, right? So it feels like this is a great time to get very clear about our new direction. Where do we want to go in our lives? And to really try to make that as embodied as possible. And I know I keep using this word embodied, but this has really been the opportunity that is being presented by this North Node transit through Taurus. And once it moves, that opportunity closes, that door closes. And it's now about spiritualizing. So if we can change embodied, and then we can get to this embodied spirituality, this move from Taurus back into Aries. So that's how you use these nodal transits, which I think are really good sort of windows of time. It gives us this 18-month period to really focus on things. It's slow enough where we can really track our development in those archetypal windows, right? So that is a big part of what's taking place here during this season. Of course, we could track a lot of other things. You can see right here, you've got Saturn coming and making this nice trine with the South Node and with Venus, who herself will be ingressing into Cancer here towards the early part of May. So another one of those sort of energy shifts, right? She's been in Gemini, which is really invigorating our willingness to communicate, to share, to really get out there and be more active socially, right? Beautifying our words, beautifying our communication, beautifying our ideas. Great time for writing and poetry and all this. Now, as she shifts into Cancer, now it's a more taking us into the more emotional nature. We're going to be feeling the desire to be more connected to family, connected to place of origin, right? All of the things that Cancer represents, this sort of maternal, nurturing quality of feeling protected, of feeling close to our friends, our family, our tribe, a very rooted time to really get in touch with your roots, what you value, right? Venus transits of Cancer are very focused on our values, our traditional values, our core values. So something else we can look at as this month unfolds, right? And then we'll look forward to, and this is probably something I won't get to until, as I said, at the very end of this period of Taurus season, as the sun ends its time in Taurus, we're going to see it gets punctuated by this Mars jumping over into Leo. And I feel like that is going to be another one of those punctuators, just as the sun will make its ingress into Gemini. This Mars opposition to Pluto most likely will be a very significant, I'm anticipating something significant within the unfolding war in the Ukraine, right? You see it's forming this square with the nodal axis as well. This is a really intense configuration. We're going to have Jupiter moving into the sign of Taurus, right? Just as the sun exits, Jupiter comes in. It's getting into a very tight conjunction here, as you can see, with the North Node. This is something big, right? Jupiter expands everything it touches. Pluto intensifies everything it touches. Mars energizes everything it touches. This will be a pretty intense, it's significant, right? So we're going to look at that a little more probably in the next video. And as I said, I want to pull up, I did a video on Putin at the end of, or as the war unfolded. and looked at his chart, there's going to be some significant transits to his natal Pluto, which is in Leo, in his 10th house, conjunct his midheaven. If you haven't seen the video I did on Putin's chart, I'll put a link to it here. It's worth looking at. And so, you know, a lot going on here in Taurus season. As I said, this, you know, Aries season, Taurus season, Gemini season, this spring quadrant here in this year. A lot of energy, a lot of shifting frequencies, a lot of intense points here that will probably be the most intense part of this year. Right? As we move into the summer and fall, things will we won't have as many of these very intense transits. So something to just be aware of, right? So hopefully that'll arm you in a way. Get prepared for this solar eclipse. It's going to be a really intense transition point. So if you can take the time to be aware and to make an intention anytime today, as you start to move into what this new period is. We're all kind of crossing this threshold together into the unknown, right? New beginnings, end of the old and the beginning of the new. So that's all I have for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button. If you haven't already subscribed, please do, so we can promote the channel. Hit the notification bell so you'll know when I put out new videos. Yeah, so thanks for listening. Until next time, Sat Nam.